Hi everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk People Development. I'm Luke, as always.
I'm Danny.
And Happy New Year. First one of 2025. It feels quite exciting, Danny, actually, that we started towards the end of the last year. We got that momentum going, and then there was that break. So I can't wait to get a solid year of podcasting under our belts this year, right?
That's exactly it. And I was thinking the same thing this morning is how much I look forward to doing these, but also to your point of getting a bit of momentum going, because I think the Christmas break, it kind of stopped that progress and I did miss it. So it's good to be back talking about it again.
Absolutely. And actually, I think our podcast is a great example of how you can do it wrong, perhaps, when it comes to setting yourself objectives or setting yourself a target or goals, because today's podcast is all about that. In fact, it's titled Progress, Not Perfection.
Yeah.
And the whole point at this brilliant time of year, I love it. I love talking to friends, to colleagues, to family that set out to do things differently. Take what they learned from last year and think about ways in which they can make improvements to their lives. Those improvements might be a continuation of. It's not always about starting the new. It's about continuing all the brilliant things that you've already done and learned from. And I guess the podcast is a good example in terms of getting a year of podcasting under our belts in 2025, Danny. We debated for quite a while in the construct of the new version of the podcast around what's the regularity, what's the frequency. And like always, we dove in with, podcasts are weekly.
Yeah, which we'd have failed immediately at because we struggled to do it bi-weekly.
Correct. And I think whilst we don't need to labor on that. That's exactly what we talk about in terms of progress and not perfection. It might be, Danny, that in 1, 2, 3 years beyond type time, we could get to a point where our personal and professional obligations and lives have allow us to do it weekly.
Yes, that's right.
It might be that case, but our progress for this podcast has to be bi-weekly. And we're not changing that, right?
I completely agree. And I think in the instance of this, it was finding a frequency, a routine that was achievable. It doesn't mean I wasn't a bit of stretching it, but it was achievable. And therefore we were absolutely confident we could do it. We didn't go into it going, God, this is like a mountain to climb. We said, no, we can do that. We can make that work. And I think that it's really easy sometimes I'm the world's worst, but I can never decide whether it's underestimating or overestimating, but whichever one it is, how long something takes or what I can achieve in a day or in an hour or in 10 minutes. I do it all the time, is I completely misjudge the reality. So therefore, finding this 2-week cadence that we found in this particular instance, we agreed that was achievable, it was doable. And I think that's a really important part of today's discussion.
Absolutely. And if you talk about that chasing of perfection, and maybe perfection isn't achievable, but the attainment of it is something that you can always strive towards. In a professional podcasting environment, weekly is the perfection. But that's never going to work for us in our worlds right now. We don't have the luxury of allowing ourselves or enabling ourselves to have that time right now. And therefore our progress is, if we can get to the end of the year and have done bi-weekly, not forgetting that we're introducing guests more regularly this year.
Yes.
So we've set our target for guests. We've set our target for how many that we can do face-to-face. I'll call you out on that. I remember you tried to make everyone face-to-face and we were going to fly around the world doing it. And you saw my face and went, oof. Ooh. can I just play devil's advocate? But hey, look, it's genuine. We want to make this success. We want to enjoy this. We do enjoy this. So I think that's the point, isn't it? The perfection in the podcasting world is weekly, sometimes more than once a week for professional podcasters. That's not for us. So what's our progress? This is it. And let's get into sort of, hopefully for those that are listening, just some of those insights into some of the things that we've learned about ourselves, but also the things that we talk about when it comes to the setting of and the attainment of the goals that we try and achieve, because it is a really great time of year to do that, right? And I really enjoy doing it for myself, but supporting others in it. But so often, it doesn't always end up the way that we set out. I mean, Danny, I'll throw the question out. I'll put shine the light on you a minute. At this time of year in the past, have you ever set yourself out to achieve 1 or 2 or 3 things and kind of got halfway through the year and gone, well, what happened to them?
Oh, for sure. I think, I join, a large majority of the population that the concept of a couple of things. One is, it's a new year, so therefore it feels like a good time to start something new. It's a new year, therefore I'm going to do something new. I also think that, probably a long time ago, I was probably more in the New Year's resolution type bucket. It's almost like you got to start it on the 1st of January. I stopped that. That was probably one of the first things I did stop doing. Probably through this job, actually, because I'd meet lots of people in January that had either were early January starting a New Year's resolution, mid-January failing at it, and by the end of January giving up on it type approach. And I thought, is it the 1st of January that creates that? Because I mean, I don't know about most people, but in my house, there's still tons of bad food. So therefore, starting a bit of healthy eating on the 1st of January is not good, right? There's loads of half-open bottles of various different things. January the 1st, I'm normally shattered because I've gone to bed later the night before because of New Year's Eve, and therefore I've been up later than I normally would do. Therefore, do I fancy starting my new exercise regime? No. Am I in the mood for reading my new, whatever it may be? Therefore, I moved away from the 1st of January and said, right, yes, it's a new year, but it doesn't have to be the 1st, right? It doesn't have to be the 1st, so we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. But then also realizing, I think to your point of your question, is that you started a lot of stuff and then gone, what happened to that? And not even realizing I'd stopped doing it, but midway through the year going, yeah, I started out with an intention of doing that, but I didn't do it, or I'm not still doing it, and why? And I find that really quite interesting.
And I think I'd like to pick up on your word. I think the word that you use, you've met people where they start something, by the middle of the month they've failed doing it, and by the end of the month it's a distant memory. I think it's reframing that middle word, because and you're not wrong in saying the word failed at doing it, right? I think, yes, I did. Only 2 days ago, met a friend online, lives out in the US, started Dry January. It was the 5th. And I'm going to use, for those that watch this, which most of you will be listening, we're not quite there yet, in inverted commas, they had a high noon salsa in their hand because they were snowed in the Midwest, and they were like, there's nothing else to do. So it's the snow's fault. But it's the reframing of the word failure, right? Because actually, yes, your intent was to do something different, and therefore that should be celebrated. It's planting a seed, isn't it? It's saying, I feel, having looked at my last year, let's talk about alcohol, right? I want to do Dry January. It's a great month to do it. Lots of people do it. A friend of mine only the other day said it's a great way for me to start my year. What's interesting is he's made it his yearly habit. So that's a good thing. To him, Dry January is the way he likes to start his year. So yes, it may fit into a time in the year where most people, or a lot of people, are trying to do it. He likes that habit. He's embraced that habit. What he doesn't say then is, after January, he's then going to change the way he approached it. He's like, that's my time of year to do it. Great. He celebrates that win. That's his time. But if you've identified something that you've trying to change, you've planted that seed. If then you attempt to do something different about that, good for you, right?
Yeah.
You're acknowledging something, you're planting the seed in your mind, and then what it's about is watering the seed, right? And sometimes we succeed and sometimes we don't quite get to where we want to. I think it's what you do at that point that's so, so important. It's about reviewing at that point, Danny, for me, because actually, to your point, you've reviewed it and gone, well, the 1st of January is not a good time. If you're doing dry January, right, most people who are doing dry January, I would argue if they're needing to do dry January, it's probably because they enjoy a drink, right? Which probably means on New Year's Eve, as the clock strikes midnight, they've got a drink in their hand, right? So I'm pretty sure that means unless another drink doesn't touch their lips, but technically they've got alcohol in their system, you're drying out at that point, right? You're still having a damp few first days, right? But anyway, Danny, to the point, I think it's the reframing is first and foremost. Be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up if you don't get there, but also don't give up as well. It's okay, well, maybe the extent at which I approach this, sometimes we overload. What are the traps, Danny? You've got overloading, so too many things to go at, right? That's one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But a big list of things. So I'm going to eat healthier. I'm going to eat 5 portions of fruit and veg a day. I'm going to do exercise. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to read more, watch less TV, less screen time, big, long list, drink more water, get more fresh air, whatever it may be. It's like a list of things. It's so easy to come up with. Probably, I'd imagine most of us could come up with a dozen things that we go, yeah, those are things I'd like to either improve on or make progress towards or make changes, I think. The common ones.
And therefore, you've got this massive list, right? First and foremost, the risk is that we try and go at too many things right at the beginning. However, let's go back to that list, right? I then look at it through a different lens. What's your purpose? Why are you doing it, right? So I'm doing it because for external reasons outside of an internal driver. Because if that's the case, there's a good chance if you don't assess that properly, they're the ones that are going to drop off pretty quickly because you might not want to. Right, so you talked about reading 55 books. Do you like reading? No, not really. Okay, so why do you want to read however many books this year? But what, because the world tells us that we should be literary geniuses and be reading every single day? No, if you don't like reading, you don't like reading. Move on, right? To the same thing of, fitness. I've got a stark reality. I started rerunning. It's been 2 years since I run the London Marathon, right? And I started again in December. I wanted to get ahead and sort of get out and build a habit. And it's become clearly apparent to me, Danny, that my age is now a factor because in 4 miles, I cannot get an average pace the same as what I did in 26 miles 2 years ago. So age is now a factor. So can I do all of the things that I physically could do when it comes to fitness? And so on and so on. They're 2 different things. One's desire and will, but the other one is it achievable in the way that I've set it up? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I do. But I think it's right. It's interesting that the desire and will bit and I love that word purpose that you use, because my immediate thought to your reading example was, what's your purpose behind the reason to read? So is it, actually, I want to learn more, right? Okay, great. What do you want to learn in? And therefore, I want to learn more, but I don't like reading. Well, there's a lot of different ways you can learn, right? Other than just reading. So therefore, if you're clear on your purpose, the same with I want to get healthy or fitter or whatever it may be. That doesn't mean to say you have to pound the gym or run miles and miles and miles, and you go, I hate running. Okay, well, find a different way to gain that, what you're trying to achieve. And most people want to be a bit fitter. Most people are not trying to become Usain Bolt, right? Most people are just trying to be a bit fitter than what they are. Therefore, is the need being fulfilled in the best possible way that suits you and where you're at? And I think that purpose is such a great question. Why am I doing this? And therefore, then, what are my different routes to get there? Because there can be lots of different ways to achieve that end goal that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think also realizing that life is tough, life is busy, And that's why it's celebrating the small wins. I'd like
Yes.
to think, I'd say on paper, I started a journey of sort of those improvements about 3 years ago. You know, I don't go to the gym. I did run for a while, and I've just acknowledged that I haven't been running for 2 years. But I'm probably healthier than I've ever been. I drink less. I used to be a smoker. Then that transferred into the new age of those little plastic, colourful things, and I'd like to think that now I've cut out some of those big ticket stuff, the binge drinking, I drink, I do, there's no doubt about it, but I'm reducing those margins. But 3 years ago, I was still in a social world where it was probably heavier on the binge drinking side, and it included all of those other things. And those things are now gone, but it's taken 3 years to get there, is the point. And I celebrated little wins. I say little wins, some of them were massive from a health perspective, but gradually and along the way, I've had setbacks and knockbacks. But here I find myself now, I still don't go to the gym. I'm trying to maybe integrate running back into my life. But like I checked the other day, and one of the things that me and Kate love to do is walk. And last year, our average per day was 9,230-ish, I believe. We're now averaged in the last 12 months, 11,790-ish, or there and thereabouts. That's what we set out to do. We didn't do it by then walking 15,000 steps a day. And in fact, if you look over Christmas, we didn't probably breach 4,000 a day. But it's that continuity, not beating ourselves up that for 2 weeks we've probably gone on holiday and done absolutely nothing, or over the summer I had a particularly busy period. It's first and foremost, to your point, purpose, but then allowing yourself to celebrate throughout. And I think what that takes is a bit of strategic thinking when it comes to goal setting and going, how do I spread it out? What are the marginal measures, the small measures along the way? If you don't go out and walk at all, and you walk for 5 minutes a day, Danny, we talked about this before you came on, you used it as an example. At the end of a 31-day working month, you've walked for 95 minutes. And having not done it the year before, that's a huge step forward, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, if you take that example alone, that 5 minutes a day at a moderate pace, so this is 5 minutes, not sort of meandering, but 5 minutes walking at a moderate pace, not running. That's what, 4 or 5 miles a month. I think about that, 4.5 miles maybe a month that you'd walk. So therefore, against that example, I'll go, well, actually 4.5 miles more I've walked this month than what I did last year on the average on the month. That's a positive, really positive step in the right direction. And then, what it's then do is then you might do that for maybe a couple of months. So you go, do you know what? I'm now in the habit of this now. It's becoming the daily routine. I don't think about it too much. I'm going to up that 5 to 10. Now I'm walking 9 miles every month. So maybe after 6 months, you might even up that to 15. All of a sudden you're walking 15 miles every month. And therefore that's 180 miles, 200 miles in a year more than you would have walked if you hadn't have set out doing just 5 minutes. And I think that I was talking to somebody on Monday, actually, on a coaching call about the film Any Given Sunday. I don't know if you remember it, but Al Pacino, I think it's Al Pacino. I'm not really good with films, but I had a thumbs up from our movie expert from behind the camera then to say I'd got the right person. But and in that film, Al Pacino, the team is behind, right? They're losing, and Al Pacino has a very, it's a very loud, swearing-filled speech about what they need to do in order to turn the game around. But the principle he talks about is inches. We've got to call about inches. On that American football field, yes, it's easy to look at the whole pitch, but it's how do I 1 inch at a time? And how important those inches are. And that's your 5 minutes of walking every day at a brisk pace, rather than, right, January 1st, I've got to start exercising more. I'm going to go for an hour's walk. And then, the next day, another hour's walk, and the next day, another hour's walk, and all those things. That's really difficult to suddenly carve out an hour in your day. I mean, that's like saying, again, we spoke about this earlier on, but my viewpoint is, in December, did you find yourself with an abundance of spare time? Where you sat there for hours going, God, I got so much time on my hands. I must find something to do with this time in the new year. No, you don't. I mean, nobody sat there with that. Everybody's going like, I'm so busy. I never get 5 minutes to myself. So what would make us think we can suddenly find an hour every day just because it's a new year? But most of us can find 5 minutes, and then you can then build that into your routine habits. And it becomes a little easier on your working, busy lives and busy day to fit those things in that you really want to achieve and accomplish. And then to your point, celebrate the success of doing so.
Absolutely. And I think I just want to acknowledge as well, you talked about the movie buffing, John acknowledging that you got the right person for the right movie. I also want to acknowledge for all of the listeners that, Danny, you just almost made yourself sound like someone that watches sport in that analogy of
I know.
NFL being a game of inches. I'm an NFL buff, and I was like, I actually believe that you may actually know a little bit about the NFL.
Well, that's what happens when you spend. Thanksgiving in the States watching American football all day last year. So that's what brought me to that.
But interestingly, that's what people find boring about the sport of NFL, right? If anybody knows NFL, yes, what they like to see is the big ticket, big throw, catch, and it looks amazing, and it's emblazoned across all sporting news, this worldly catch. But then they watch the reality of the game and they go, well, this is boring. Because in the game of NFL, you've got 4 attempts to get 10 yards, 4 attempts to get 10 yards, okay? So they will strategically, on the sideline, be talking to the person with the ball, the quarterback, and asking them to play different techniques, different plays to get that 10 yards. Sometimes they want to get a yard. Sometimes they want to get 3. Sometimes they will do that unbelievable throw that takes them 50 yards beyond what they needed. But most of the game is about those incremental steps to getting 4 attempts to getting 10 yards. Simple as that, right? Sounds simple. It's not as simple as that. But when they're methodical in the way they think about it, because not every time are they going to be able to have these big, you're not going to get 10 yards every time. What are the little gains? And I think it's a fantastic example of what we need to do when it comes to this time of year. Let's not look at what we can achieve by March. Let's look at what we can achieve by the end of the year, to your point. What could it look like? Often I'm driven by putting something into the calendar. I typically in the past, hopefully I've learned from my mistakes, getting into the running, once I get into it, I enjoy it. But typically in the past, at this time of year, I've signed up to something by March. Okay, so a 10K, for instance. And that then becomes a weight, a weight that I'm carrying. A burden, right? So I've put something in for June, 6 months. Not forgetting that, 2 years ago, I could get completely deluded by the fact that 2 years ago I ran the London Marathon. Therefore, surely 2 years on, it shouldn't be that bad. No, it will be. It will be painful. And we've got a busy first quarter. And therefore, if I can get to a small distance run in June, on the 15th of June, as I planned, great. Because it's more running than I did last year. This year, it was all about walking. We want to continue that. I'm happy with the walking side, but the running side might help me with the weight loss that I'm looking to do. But actually, the weight loss is my byproduct, okay? It's not the main centerpiece. Again, learning, finances, all of these little things. If we take on too much at the beginning, it can be overwhelming and we don't know where to start and we don't start at all. If we take on a load of things but don't look at the desire and will and the purpose and look through our lens, authentically through our lens and say, do I actually really want that? Or is that something that I've seen, heard about on socials or in the news, that these are the things that I should or should not be doing, whether it's the latest type of food hygiene approach and so on, but is that actually what I enjoy? So desire and will. To then spread it out. Right, spread out. Each one needs a steady spread, but also some of them you might need to stagger when you start, Danny. That's another thing, isn't it? Actually, if you've got a big long list, imagine having a calendar that says, goal number 1, which starts on, the 4th of January and will go throughout the whole year. And these are my milestones, but I'm not going to start because of that. Goal number 1's about running. I'm not going to start going to the gym because I want a baseline of fitness until June. Now, some people will go, what? You're not going to actually get a membership until June. To those people, you need to turn around and go, yeah, I'll see you in June, because you'll have your naysayers. I'll see you in June and see if you're still using your membership as I'm starting mine, type thing. I know that's a bit abrupt, but you will get those naysayers.
No, it works.
Right.
It does work. It does. It work. The concept works for me, and I can go back to this kind of my own kind of exploration of this, and I do find trying stuff out, especially when I'm going to talk about it. I'd rather try it for my own way and then have my own viewpoint and my own opinion on it. And I talked about a long time ago, gave up on the 1st of January stuff and found that just as long as I do whatever I'm trying to do in January, but I found that was particularly challenging. I think it was because I just took too much on. Last year, Susan and I set out with a bit of that kind of we did 12 things. So there were 12 little things. They weren't big things, but 12 little things we want to do. And 8 of them we still do. So we did 12 one a month. So we just had a list of things each month and we bring those things in, which we did. And every month we get some we did and went, I don't really know whether that's actually what we wanted to achieve. So there was a little bit of tweaking and turning around. But coming into this year, 8 of the 12 things we set out to do, we now do with such routine, we don't even think about it. It is just automatic. One simple one was 10:30, TV goes off. We were midway through the 4th episode of Squid Games last night on Netflix. It was getting really good, and we have an alarm on our phone that it's a different alarm tone, so it sticks in your mind. That's a 10:30 alarm tone. And Susie's automatic behaviour to hit the power button on the TV on the best bit of Squid Game. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, it's 10:30. I was like, just no. And it's like, you've got that discipline of we're done. And it's those simple things that were important to us. And somebody else might say, I don't care about what time we go. Great, find your own. But I do think the incremental bringing stuff in and making it so it's almost as easy as possible. So to your point of let's say it was running was your thing, and you said, right, I'm going to do a mile. I'm going to do a mile 3 times a week in Jan. I'm going to do 2 miles in Feb, and it build up that way. And whatever it may be, it's you're piecing it together, but also cutting yourself some slack. If when you get there, you go, do you know, I'm not quite ready for that. But then patting yourself on the back for what you have accomplished up to that point, rather than seeing it as failure because you haven't reached the milestone that you set out to achieve.
100%. And I really liked your example that you gave. And when you assessed the 4 that you didn't do, some of them they didn't fit, they didn't work for your lifestyle, you didn't enjoy them. That's all right. Just move on. Just move on from it. Don't overthink it. Also there's another way of doing it that goes, okay, running. Okay, is it that I'm running on my own and I don't enjoy that? Is it that I'm running outside and therefore I prefer running on a treadmill and therefore maybe I do get a gym membership, but maybe in a gym that isn't full of people like that are sort of absolute health focused in terms of, what I'm trying to say, weights and that sort of gym that can be quite intimidating. And maybe you just go to a smaller gym where you can find a treadmill in the corner and you walk on an incline because you don't like walking outside. But it might be you need the company. I run well with company. Try new things against the same goal, because it might not be the goal that you're trying to attain either. It might just be the way you're set up isn't going to quite work for you, your personality and the way you go about it. But I think most importantly, I think it's so important what you said there, Danny, is for years and years it's been sort of, I think, publicized that you've got to attain the highest of goals and you've got to stretch yourself to the highest of goals and you've got to achieve and you've got to win, and outside of winning it's failure. And these words are kind of still thrown around in terms of what great looks like. You've got
scary. Some people still believe that.
Absolutely. And maybe that works for those people, right? That's what drives certain people. Unfortunately, that's kind of half the time they're the examples that we will use are those that are absolutely, you look at someone like Cristiano Ronaldo in football, players that played with him said that they were professionals themselves, and said they were exhausted by his obsessive nature about being totally and utterly focused and elite. You know, they want to go around his house and he'd have a personal chef. I read something the other day. I think it was one of his former teammates, Patrice Evra, and the food came out, and Patrice Evra, French, loves great food, and it doesn't have to be healthy food. It's like, what is that? And he's like, that is all we're eating today. And the chef had prepared this health-focused thing. He's like, I've just been training for 4 hours. Yeah. Give me some carbs, man. And, you know, so we've got to look to real-world examples that allow us to feel great about ourselves. And I want anybody that's listening to this that has tried something new, no matter how many days you get into that before you might hit a bump, good on you. Yeah. Because you've given it a go, right? And if it doesn't continue, don't beat yourself up about it, but maybe readdress why you didn't. Was it the purpose that was misaligned? Was it your frequency that you were doing it that was misaligned? Had you aimed for too much too early? And therefore, you might want to try it again with a different focus. But be kind to yourself. If anybody has set a New Year's resolution and are going for something, well done. You've already achieved something. That's what I love about this time of year, is that almost there's this camaraderie around people trying something new. But let's not also beat ourselves up and beat one another up if you've got those accountability partners where you go, you hold me to account. Okay, well, do it in the right way. Be highly challenging, but also be highly supportive. Because by getting up and trying something new, you're already winning. That's my view.
Absolutely.
That is what winning is starting something, planting new seeds and giving something a go. And that's a good effort for me.
Yeah, and I totally support that, and I agree, and I think it's brilliantly positioned as well, because that principle of success, if you like, of going, right, I've accomplished something and I'm stepping in the right direction. Every step in the right direction is a step, right? And we should celebrate that. And I think if you can couple a bit of learning in there, you know, so to go, right, well, this did work really well for me. I did this exactly as I expected, and I stuck with it, or it worked how I expected. What was it about that seemed to work for you? Or I found that really difficult. I thought it was going to be easy, but actually it's way more difficult than I thought. And therefore, you know, I was going to do it every day, but I ended up not doing it every day. I ended up doing it 3 days a week. So I've still done more than what I would have done. But why was that? And what can I learn from that what happened, and then use that learning, pay that learning forward into whatever endeavors you set on next. And hopefully, what you hope is that then the next thing that you try, you set yourself up even more so for you accomplishing what you're trying to achieve, because you've learned from the last time. And therefore, again, that's another step of progress in the right direction. And I think if we all did that, that's a pretty good outcome from a New Year's resolution.
Absolutely right. Well, thank you, Danny. Absolute pleasure to start the year with a podcast in our first official working week. Thank you to all those listening. Good luck with any resolutions that you may or may not have set. And if you haven't set any, good for you. It might be that that's your goal this year. I'm not setting new Year's resolutions.
Indeed.
I'm just going to take the year as it comes. Good for you too. We'll be back every other week, not weekly, because we're just focusing on our progress with the podcast in a couple of weeks' time. But from me, thank you. Have a great January. We'll be back with you in the middle of the month.
Agreed. Thank you. Thanks, Luke. Great conversation. Really enjoyable session. Speak soon.
See you soon.